Most people spend their evenings looking at Instagram or Netflix. I tend to spend time staring at maps or Google Earth, thinking about new places to explore. And that's how I came across this hike. It's called the Sky Rim Trail, and it follows the actual boundary of the very northwest corner of Yellowstone National Park. Looking straight down on it from Google Earth, it appeared to be a nearly flat, knife-edged ridge trail, and I was fascinated to see what it was really like. Once again, the reality of this experience proved to me the stupidity of choosing a path based on Google Earth, and would lead to one of the most strenuous days of my backpacking life. Living in Montana as I do, you might think I would spend lots of time hiking in Yellowstone. After all, literally millions of people drive thousands of miles or fly in from around the world just to see this flagship first national park in the world. Although I had visited several times by car, up till now I never took the extra effort to actually pack into the backcountry of Yellowstone. The proximity of Glacier National Park and the Bob Marshall Wilderness, among many others in northwest Montana, meant that I already had an embarrassment of riches for hiking opportunities. But this year I decided to change that, and this is the story of my first backpacking trip in Yellowstone. What I discovered was that hiking in Yellowstone is radically different from hiking in Glacier. Well, that is the Specimen Creek trailhead, and the creek itself is just over that little hump. And just getting started. Got really fortunate, and a kind gentleman named Rick gave me a ride from the Daly Creek trailhead to this one, Specimen Creek, which saved me 4 miles on my bike, and I also don't have to come back and get my bike when I'm done with this hike. Howdy.
Hi, how's it going?
Good, how you doing?
Good.
Hi, how's it going? Well, here's a very nice little dining area, and the food pole up there, apparently the toilet is across the meadow there, which is a long ways, but maybe that's okay. The only thing that's missing is tent sites. This is my first time in Yellowstone. I'm used to Glacier, where everything is so clearly laid out, but there doesn't seem to be any designated tent sites, which is kind of a problem because there's flat ground, but it's marshy and not really great for setting up a tent. Well, exploring around a little, I did find this spot, which looks pretty sweet. It's right by a, not terribly tall, it is by itself. I'm not crazy about that with potential thunderstorms on the horizon. Stream is right there. Well, it's only 4:30 and still 80 degrees out, but I've got my pants and my wind shirt on just to protect me from the flies that are so terrible. They're like deer flies, but smaller. But they bite. I definitely made a tactical error in getting here so early, and I wish I would have brought my book. I'm afraid I'm going to have to set up the shelter and just dive into it and probably sweat like crazy just to get away from the flies, because the only other way to do that is to keep hiking, and there's nowhere to go. I'm already at my campsite. Ultimately, after setting up camp quick, oh boy. After setting up camp quick and finally hanging my food, I did decide to just day hike up the North Fork Trail a couple of miles to be free from the flies. And I'm really glad I did, because otherwise I might have missed this gorgeous gal. Not to mention some other very pretty scenery. So the original plan was to do this hike clockwise because that seemed to make the most sense from the standpoint of balancing the miles traveled over 4 days. However, like most major national parks, Yellowstone requires you to apply long in advance for a permit to reserve each camping site, and I didn't get my first choices. So I came up with an alternate plan that took me in a counterclockwise direction instead. This would turn out to be the right way to go, as you will see, but the campgrounds I was assigned really didn't make sense because they would mean very short mileage for 3 consecutive days, followed by a huge 4th day to get out. I wasn't too stressed about this because I know from hiking in Glacier that you can often make last-minute changes when you show up on the day of the hike to get the permit because of cancellations and the fact that they hold back some campsites from the advanced reservations. I was able to make some changes, negotiating with the ranger lady in the backcountry office at West Yellowstone, but still was denied the campgrounds I most wanted. That fact would come to haunt me later on. So the second alternate plan was this. So beginning at the Specimen Creek trailhead, I would travel up the Specimen Creek Trail to the campground that's at Specimen Creek Junction, and then up the Sportsman Lake Trail to this junction here, on up to the High Lake Trail to High Lake, then up over Shooting Star Mountain, and then there's a pretty serious elevation loss, and then slight gain back up to Crescent Lake, and then big elevation loss down to this junction and on up to Shelf Lake. A little bit more climb, and then you're up on the ridge all along this trail, climbing up to the high point of Bighorn Peak, just under 10,000 feet. Then along this Skyrim Trail to right here, there's Daly Pass, and you take this junction down to Upper Daly Creek and on down Daly Creek to right here, the Daly Creek trailhead where my truck was parked. And I had planned to just ride my bike on this bit of the highway. It's 4 miles between trailheads, but as I mentioned already, I got lucky and got a ride. But although that was a blessing to get a ride and not have to do that bike ride, it also contributed to me getting to this campground too early in the day. So incidentally, if I was to do this trip again, I think it would be much better to spend the first night at the High Lake Sportsman Junction campground, or possibly High Lake if you can manage that on the first day. And then second day at Shelf Lake, and then the third night at Upper Daly Creek. That's not what happened with me. I had the first night at Specimen Creek, the second night at Crescent Lake, and the third night I was supposed to come clear over to Black Butte Creek and spend the night there, and then come back over on the fourth day and back down Daly Creek, but as you'll see, it didn't turn out that way. I did actually set up the shelter a little way away from that tree, rather than risk being under the lone tree in case a thunderstorm rolled through in the middle of the night.
Well, good morning. Decided to have a slow start and sleep in a bit this morning because there's no flies and mosquitoes first thing in the morning. But when I get to my campsite, I think I'll probably be there early enough that it's going to be kind of unpleasant there. So I figured I might as well spend time where it is pleasant when it's pleasant. But maybe I'm wrong, and it'll be just fine there too. Hoping to get to Crescent Lake today, which should be 12 miles, and I believe about 2,500 feet elevation gain. So could be a bit of a chug because it's only 8:30 and it's already 80 degrees. So could be a toasty one. Let's go.
This bridge being washed out was the first sign I encountered of the extensive flooding that happened this spring, which resulted in enormous damage to the park, even completely cutting off the gateway community of Gardner from the outside world for several weeks.
That tree was my campsite, and this is the lovely valley.
Although I've owned a backpacking umbrella for years, this was the first time I used it on the trail. Using the new Kakwa 40 by Durston Gear inspired me because of the shoulder pocket seemed like the perfect holder for the umbrella handle. It worked okay, but was a little awkward, so I soon ditched it when I got out of the open country.
This is what normally would be the log walk across this little stream, and no big deal. But looks like the high water pushed it out of the way. So this year it's a ford. There's a second one over a secondary channel that survived. This is the lovely setting of the Sportsman Lake Junction campground. A little ways off the main trail, but seems like a pleasant enough spot. So here is High Lake, and you can just see the trail taking off over on the far side there, up to the ridge. There's the dining area for High Lake. And there's the food pole. And there's a beautiful big meadow with springs just to the, I guess it would be south
of the lake. Overall, a very pleasant place, but I have to say it's a little anticlimactic. After climbing so much elevation to get up here, I would have expected something a bit more spectacular. It's also surprising that there was nobody else at my campground last night. I passed 2 campgrounds on the way up here with no sign of life, and there's 2 campgrounds here at High Lake, and again, no one here. The bugs are much better. There's a few around, but definitely left all those nasty flies back down in the low elevation with the horse poop. There was quite a bit of blowdown on the trail. I'm really amazed at the relative lack of trail maintenance compared to Glacier, although I imagine most of the crews are focused on rebuilding what was flooded. You sure could tell that there was some flooding here as well, even though I'm in the northwest corner, and most of the damage happened in the north central and northeast corner. Well, I got another 800 feet of elevation to climb to Shooting Star Mountain before I can turn the corner and head down to Crescent Lake. Here's the first view over the top of the ridge, looking to the north. The trail peters out sometimes in some of these high meadows, but these little square markers are a godsend to help you find the way. So far they've been perfectly placed, just when I needed it. This is the summit of Shooting Star Mountain, and there's not much to see up here except that little telecommunications billboard that's on top of, I think it's Sheep Mountain, just above Shelf Lake. Otherwise, it's kind of a waste of the climb. And here's another little tarn up high, in between High Lake and Crescent Lake. Well, they're not making it easy for me. The last half mile to Crescent Lake is a brutal climb, and lots of blowdown, which looks like it's gonna continue. Made it to Crescent Lake. There's the food prep area, and I don't see a food pole, which I think I remember being told that that's on your own, as is the toilet. Well, I believe I found an honest-to-God campsite. First one I've seen, and the lake is just right down through there. Well, I looked around a bit and found a spot that I like better. Rather have a nice cushy spot. Really hoping we don't get a big wind tonight.
There's so many dead trees around. They're just waiting for the slightest puff of breeze to fall down. I could be in a world of hurt in the middle of the night. This is just one of those peak refuel freeze-dried meals. It's so much food in those that I split it in half, put it in Ziploc bags, and just add half the water, and it works great. It also seems to take a lot less water than a lot of the other meals, so that's what we got for dinner tonight. You might notice I've decided to stop bringing my cozy along because I noticed that it was actually keeping it too warm too long. The 10 minutes that it takes to rehydrate is also good cooling down time, so that by the time it's rehydrated, it's cool enough to eat. I was wasting too much time waiting for it to cool down to actually eat it. It's just right. Man, teriyaki chicken rice, peak refuel, pretty good. Well, that was a good meal, and looked around a little, and I discovered there actually is a food pole here, so I'll be hanging my stuff up over there in a minute here. Looks like right exactly at 13 miles today, which maybe doesn't sound too impressive, but it was a little over 3,000 feet of elevation gain and a fair amount of loss getting back down in here, and quite a bit of blowdown on some of the trails. So I'm pooped, and I think I earned it. It's a beautiful place though, and the flies are non-existent, and the mosquitoes are a little bad but not too bad, and they seem to be a little less active as the sun goes down. I plan to watch that beautiful sunset against the amazing cliffs on the other side of the lake here. Pretty impressive. See you tomorrow. Well, good morning. I am up early, partly out of nervousness and partly out of excitement, because today is the highlight of the trip. I get to climb up above Shelf Lake and hike the Sky Rim Trail, which was the whole point of this trip. So really looking forward to getting up there and seeing that high country. Nervousness is partly about navigating some of the off-trail pieces, but mainly it's over potential thunderstorms rolling in. That's another reason I'm up early, is I wanted to make sure that I got across that 8 miles of high ridge before the afternoon storms come in. So let's get at it. That's where I'm headed. Somewhere on that mountain is Shelf Lake. I'm gonna have to climb up that ridge to the left there to get up on top. guidebook says the going is pretty easy after the ridge, but I call this steep. Well, I think I'm at least halfway. Turned the corner. So that looks fun. Might not want to do this trail if a person was afraid of heights.
This was one of those trails where I kept looking ahead and asking myself, is it possible it goes up there? See it now? Over to the right. Yep, there it is.
I only now got close enough to see where the trail actually goes. And you can just barely see it going across that ridge and up around that end of the mountain. Coming down this steep hill from Black Butte, there's a row of markers marking the edge of Yellowstone, and those boundary markers serve as a really good tool to find your way down this steep hill. It looks like I'm going to climb that mountain, and then I think the one to the right after that. Well, I'm down off that hill and back to an actual trail, for which I'm grateful. Unfortunately, now I gotta climb that mountain. Oh, they were making me go right to the top of this summit. Seems like they could have cut off the edge a bit. Not that I'm complaining. The guidebook talked about the possibility of camping, a dry camp, up high in between the two major summits. Sorry, the two minor summits. And there's actually a clump of trees here that would make that very doable. Got some protection and certainly views to kill for. By which I mean this. By my accounting, that's summit number 5 since Black Butte Mountain. This is a lot more strenuous effort than I had expected. Looks like I'm about to lose some serious elevation for one more summit. At least I hope that's the last summit, because it keeps going that way. And maybe I have to climb that mountain too. But those little humps on the edge there are the ultimate goal. We'll see what it takes to get there. Well, there's the first and likely only snowbank that I've encountered on the trail. Looks like I might get to dodge that last mountain on the right. Hopefully. That's looking down in the Daly Creek drainage. Well, not so lucky after all. One more summit they're going to force me to climb in order to get down to that ridge line down there. Headed down to those humps. looking up at Skyrim, part of it at least. Well, turns out I wasn't foolish to rush along that ridge. I just heard a couple of peals of thunder, and I'm really glad I'm down off that before that came in. Well, I'm camped down that way, and here we got our food prep area for Upper Daly Creek and the food pole, and that's about it. I'm just gonna try to see if I can get a quick dinner made in between thunderstorms. Just for the record, I'm gonna call that 13.5 miles today and 5,000 feet of elevation gain, and almost the same in loss, because there were 6 extra summits after the big one, which I can never remember the name of it. I want to call it Black Butte, but that's not right. The guidebook really downplayed how strenuous that trail was, and man, it was designed by a sadist, going up over every single summit when it could have cut across the edge of the mountain and avoided some of that elevation gain and loss. So it was a brutal day. I'm going to put this in my top 5 of most strenuous days backpacking, even though I got here at 5:30, I think it was, and again, nobody here. And I sat in the backcountry office 2 days before the trip, or the day I started the trip, till 2 days before now, and asked the lady if I could stay here at Upper Daly Creek, and she said no, and instead wanted me to go to Black Butte, which would have added an extra 2 miles, really 4, because it would have had a backtrack tomorrow, and probably another 500 feet of elevation gain, and I am just done climbing today. So that was crazy. I wasn't sure whether to jump into here or not and risk getting in trouble, but the thunder started just when I pulled in here. I had to come in to this campsite because I've been out of water for about 2 hours, so I was really hurting. So I pulled in to get some water and just to check out the site, and nobody here, and then this thunder started and rain, so I threw up the shelter real quick, and it's been raining and thunder and lightning off and on ever since. And I drank about 2.5 liters of water. Boy, it sure tastes good when you're dehydrated and freaking 90 degrees in the sun on that whole trip. I did try the umbrella briefly, but just kind of tosses around too much and wouldn't stay put, and the slightest breeze made it want to take off. So it feels really great to be underneath it, but overall kind of too much hassle, more hassle than it's worth. Although I really would have liked to have it today, because this was a sufferfest. Alright, I think that's about it. Probably not going to get a good sunset shot tonight, because it's 8 o'clock and I'm going to bed. I'm not going to wait up long enough to get a good sunset shot. The sun's just going behind a ridge there, but only a ridge. You probably can't see that through the netting. but that's it for tonight. And tomorrow, just 3.5 miles and a 7-hour drive home. Well, good morning. The rain and thunder chased me into the tent at 7:30 last night. So I feel like I've been in bed for a really long time. So I'm up early at 5:30, even though I only have 3 miles to go to the truck. So eating cold, just ready to get on the trail, get going. Mosquitoes and flies have just been terrible on this trip, which also drove me into the tent last night because there's just no getting away from them. And that's another reason I'm up early and eating fast, trying to get stuff taken care of before they start getting active. I think it's probably another sign of what a unusually wet spring we had. Usually by the end of July, almost August, you wouldn't have to worry about the mosquitoes, at least. I just am shocked that I did run into some people yesterday on the Skyrim Trail, but other than Shelf Lake, I haven't seen anybody camped anywhere. It's just amazing to me in Yellowstone National Park that there aren't more people out here during the high season.
Between the rain from the night before and the dew of the morning, the brush over the trail was saturated, so I was quickly soaked from the knees down. Although I didn't mind much because it was such a beautiful morning, with the sun slanting over the low rolling hills. The long sleep had cured my grumpiness from the night before, and I had a spring in my step over the final few miles to the truck. Made it to the truck just fine, but as a postscript, I almost didn't make it home due to this fire nearly blocking my way. This was the very first day of the Elmo fire, which would cause Highway 93 to be blocked completely for several days and eventually torch over 21,000 acres. Luckily, I always take a shortcut home on back roads, and my turnoff was just before the road closure.